Welcome back to Julie's Village. I'm glad you're here. This episode is all about sensory needs and ways that we can help address them. There are two main categories that sensory needs fall under. There's hypersensitive, that's where a person is getting too stimulated from sensory input, and so they try to avoid the input. Hyposensitive is when they are not getting enough stimulation from the input, and so they are seeking more input. Every person falls somewhere on this spectrum. We all have a sensory profile. We all have things that we like and don't like sensory wise. And that becomes even more pronounced when there are needs that fall outside of the typical. Oftentimes, especially with a neurodivergence, these sensitivities come to the point where they become completely distracting, or the way that a person responds to them becomes distracting to themselves or to others, or disruptive in some way. So knowing where a person is at is the first thing, to just recognize where those needs are. And a person isn't just hyposensitive or just hypersensitive. It usually depends on the situation and what the stimulation is. Some people really like loud music. They just love the energy that brings. Other people cannot stand loud music. It hurts their ears. It's uncomfortable. They have trouble focusing. So those are the type of things that are important to tease out for your child. If you're noticing, sometimes you might see that there are some extreme behaviors and you don't know where they're coming from. There just doesn't seem to be a clear trigger. Sometimes you might, and that could be an indicator that something sensory is going on for a child. Or you might see some really physical indicators that can be good clues for what is going on. And we're going to talk about some of those clues and then how to address them. So, one quick, easy tell is covering ears. That is something that is pretty common. A pretty common sensory need for people is that noise one again. If things are too loud, and it might be again that they like music loud, but they don't like any kind of environmental loud noises, horns honking, toilets flushing, fireworks going off, those kind of things, mechanical noises, doors shutting and opening, squeaking sounds, sounds from fans, those kind of things can be really adverse, or they might really like them. If it's adverse, you might see that they cover their ears, you might see that they run out of a room. Those are times when you might consider doing headphones, and headphones can vary. It can be you can do like the earbud headphones, you can do the headphones that cover the entire ear. It just the way that you might make your decision there is just how much are they concerned about their peers noticing them? Is that a factor? If that's the case, then they might want to go with whatever is most popular with their peers, the earbuds or the full head covering. Another thing to consider is I sometimes see students who would push on their face at the same time as they're covering their ears. So that helped to regulate as well, to put a little bit of pressure on the face around the ears. And that might be a time to get either just those noise canceling headphones, or you might want to get just headphones that don't produce any kind of sound. They don't have any sound hookup. Or you might want to get headphones that do allow that sound if they do seek that sensory input of music. Music is an interesting one too, because music can be something that we are hyper or hyposensitive to, depending on the style of music. So it might be that if there is a fan that they really just don't like, they will do better taking a test or something like that if they can have their headphones on with classical music playing or something like that. So those are things to consider, to be aware of. That is with sound. There's so much going on in the face. That's where we eat our food, and so there could be some sensory things with food. That might be something to consider if you are struggling to get your child to eat. It might be a taste issue, it might be a sensory issue. I don't know much about this, but I do know that there are food therapies out there that you could look into. And that's something that I can explore more for future videos or in future topics. But there are things that can be done to help expose your child to different sensory or different styles of food, different tastes, different textures that can help your child to learn about those things that specifically they like or don't like, can help you learn what your child specifically does or doesn't like, and that can help with that eating issue. Another thing that I frequently see is biting, students biting themselves or children biting themselves or biting others. Sometimes that biting can come because of sensory issues in the jaw. They are seeking that input in the jaw. There are things that you can do to put a little bit of pressure on the jaw that you can look into. I sometimes, again, would use headphones in that way. Those are really big headphones. I would place them so that they covered the ear and put a little bit of pressure right at the top of the jaw. I worked with an occupational therapist who also recommended that if you can get anything that vibrates and have them either rub that along the jaw or having that on the inside of the mouth, things that they can bite and chew. There's lots of things available on Amazon and in other places that are just handheld devices that give that little bit of vibration that are safe to put in the mouth or around the mouth. So those are things to consider there. Then other things are more of like that full body, either around that trunk area or the upper torso or legs. There are so many things that can be used to help give that stimulus or pressure there. Some people have talked about how their child is very adverse to hugs. Oftentimes, that aversion is a sensory aversion. They are getting too much stimulation. They need that space. Some really seek those hugs. You might see it because they often snuggle up to you, or you see them often seeking for smaller spaces, climbing into cubbies, under beds, into cupboards, any small spaces they can find. If you find your child spending lots of time in small spaces, you might consider providing some things that will help them to get more of that deep pressure stimulation on arms and upper body. There's a couple of things. There's compression vests and there's weighted vests. The compression vest is going to give more of that like squeezing sensation, and it's going to be just generalized, where a weighted vest is specifically going to put pressure on the shoulders. If your child is verbal, I would recommend, if you have access or a way to try both and see what your child says they prefer, or to see what, if they are nonverbal, just to see how do they respond. If we do a couple of minutes in one, how are they acting? How are they interacting with others? And how are they responding to the vest itself? Are they trying to pull it off? Do they just seem relaxed? You can also get a similar sensation from some of those like really tight Under Armour shirts. Those can give that pressure on the arms as well. I do recommend, if you're going to try some of these sensory things, to work with an occupational therapist on this, because there are certain things that you don't want to create a situation where your child can only operate when they're getting that sensory input. They do recommend, often I've heard recommendations of having so many minutes with it on, so long between before you have it on again, just so that it helps your child to recognize that they can use it as a tool, but that it doesn't become a constant need. Right along with those weighted vests or compression vests, there are also things that can give some of that weight and pressure to the legs and to that lower trunk. You can try weighted blankets. They also, I'm excited to see around at different stores and things, I've started to notice that they are making weighted stuffed animals. Those are great if there needs to be some prolonged sitting and you have a child who struggles with that, they want to get up and run, they might benefit from having a weighted stuffed animal or a weighted blanket or something else heavy that just sits in their lap when they are either sitting on the ground or sitting in the chair, either one that they might need prolonged sitting. Right along with that, for that idea of sitting and being able to maintain that sitting, if that is something that your child struggles with, they do make things that give input again to the legs and trunk. And they are more that more have to do with seating options. Many people are familiar with yoga balls and students sitting on yoga balls. They do make bases so that those yoga balls aren't just rolling around everywhere. That's one option. The great thing about that is that it engages the trunk, and engaging the trunk for that balance often helps with focus. They also make T-stools, which are just one bar with a platform on top that a student can sit on or a child can sit on. Again, that gives that they're using their legs to balance and engaging the core, which helps with focus, but also gives a little bit of wiggle that they can do as they're sitting on the stool. There are also wiggle seats that they make. They're just pads that go on a chair. They're air-filled pads that you can inflate more or reduce how much they're inflated based again on the preference of the person using them, that can give some of that sensory input. They make them smooth or they can make them a little bit textured and bumpy, and that can give some of that input as they're sitting. They can just feel that specific feedback into their legs. With all of these things, there are safety aspects that you definitely want to take into consideration and teach your child how to use these tools so that they can maintain safety. And again, you might consider consulting with an OT on how to use these things, these different tools best, and they might have recommendations again on what you are seeing and matching that with what a child needs. There are other smaller things that can be done as well that just provide some of that smaller texture input. There are lots of things that are just made for hands, just within hands, and that again can just be enough for some people. They just need that little bit of input, and that can help with focus. Oftentimes we hear them referred to as fidgets. They do make so many options of fidgets now. Again, I would do some trial and error and see how they respond to that fidget. Does the fidget become a distraction, or does the fidget allow the hands to be busy and minds to be focused? Does the fidget become a distraction to others? Does it become a toy rather than a tool for them? If that's the case and it's preventing them from doing the things that they need to be doing, then that's not a good match. So you just keep looking for different things you can try. We have also done some really simple things. For instance, if a child's in their homework area, they're their seat at the dinner table or their desk at school, there are different textured things that you can put on the bottom of the table or desk or their working area so that they can just get a quick sensory input option for their hands. So, for instance, they make different tapes that have different textures. We've also done things like putting sandpaper. If they like that rough feeling, we've done softer things. Just you could put something that's more like a cotton ball under there. Again, just knowing your child and what things they like and don't like, how they impact them. Is it getting the desired impact for you? Does it help with calming? Does it help with focus? Does it get more excited and more energized? Depending on your situation and what is going on within the day or your routine, that is going to also play into what are you looking for from the sensory? Are you trying to help them wake up and get more energy going? Or are you trying to help them to calm down? And some of these same tools can actually do both things. For instance, a yoga ball can help with that focus and help them to just move a little bit in that same spot. But also, moving around on the yoga ball can help to wake up some of those muscles and those brain activities so that we get students and children more awake and energized. So again, I would point again to occupational therapists. They are typically the experts on what to do here. These are just different strategies that I have worked with occupational therapists on trying for students. I've seen them be successful, but there isn't a cut and dry rule for every student with these needs this particular thing. There's so much about, again, that personal preference and what you're seeing, how you're seeing a child respond to the strategies. If you have some specific tools or ideas that you would like to share, I invite you to leave that in the comments. If you have questions about specific sensory ideas, I invite you to leave those in the comments as well. If you have any recommendations or questions or topics or people to have on future episodes, I invite you to leave those in the comments. If this information has been helpful for you, I invite you to like, share, subscribe. That just helps make this channel more accessible to others and help get the word out there to others who might need this information as well.